Good morning, this is Angela with Parker's Permaculture. Today I'm coming to you from the front sunroom of my house that my eldest child has turned into her solarium for all of her houseplants. I want to talk to you today about winter squash. This is going to be a two-part series. Today I want to talk about strategies for keeping your winter squash so that you can enjoy all of your harvest. The second part, which I hope you tune in for tomorrow, I will be cutting into this squash that I grew last year and has been stored appropriately for 13 months. I want to see what it looks like inside because this is a variety that supposedly can keep for 9 to 14 months, and I want to see if it lives up to its reputation. So today let's talk about the strategies for keeping your winter squash, what you need to know, and the do's and don'ts. Now, it's no secret if you look at some of my other videos, winter squash is my favorite annual veggie to grow. They are an important calorie crop for our family in the winter. They're versatile. I can use them in cakes and breads and soups and stews and pies. You can use them in sweet and savory dishes. They're high in vitamin A. They're really, really good for you. And they come in such a broad variety that winter squash is not really one kind of food. It's a variety of foods with different tastes and colors and textures. So what do I need to know in order to keep my winter squash that I have grown and tended and lovingly harvested out of my garden and want to enjoy eating? What are the things that will make my squash keep? They are called keeper squash, right? Winter squash are harvested in the autumn and enjoyed throughout those winter months. One of the things that makes them such a special and important crop is that you don't have to preserve them. They don't require canning or freezing. Although I do roast a good quantity of squash and freeze it so that I can just pull a packet out of the freezer, let it thaw in the fridge overnight, and then use it for, muffins or quick bread or something like that. You can keep your whole squash and it will keep for a long period of time. So what strategies do we need to employ to know that we will have success in keeping our winter squash? Number one is be choosy about the varieties that you are growing and how long they are going to keep. Different varieties of squash are bred to keep different lengths of time. So for instance, delicata squash, which is one of my favorite easy growers, it really is not a keeper squash. It keeps maybe 2 or 3 months. Then there's Burgess buttercup, which will easily keep 3 to 6 months. And then there are things like sweetmeat, this big honker right here, or winter banana or Hubbards squash that are bred to keep 6, 9, or even 12 or more months at room temperature. So know what you are growing and not only plan your harvest accordingly, but plan your order of consumption appropriately. So my delicatas are eaten first. And then once we've worked through all of those, I enjoy my Burgess buttercup. Once we've worked through all of those, I eat my sweetmeats. And for me, that's been a really successful strategy because I know that some squash are bred to keep a shorter amount of time than others. Now, what happens if you store your winter squash too long? It can become kind of stringy and pithy and mealy, and the flavor can really deteriorate. So even if it looks good on the outside, you may notice that your delicata starts to change color, and you will find that the flavor deteriorates. Those varieties that are bred to keep a long time, they keep their texture and their flavor much longer, as well as their edibility. And when we grow things in our garden, we want to enjoy them at peak flavor and nutrition, right? So, like I said, number one, make sure that you are storing them for the amount of time they're meant to be stored, right? Eat them in order of how long they're supposed to keep. The second strategy is when you harvest your squash, let it cure in the garden for a few days in the sunshine. I wait until all of the vines die back. I cannot tell you how many folks I see in August and September saying, oh, I picked my butternut or I picked my, sugar pie pumpkin too early and it's not mature. I wait until all of the vines die, but before I have a killing frost. And then I go ahead and pick them. And then I let them sit out in the sunshine for a day or two. Now, if it's raining where you are, you maybe want to leave them under your back porch. I would say be careful for things like raccoons. I had accidentally left 3 of my pumpkins in my garden and raccoons destroyed all of them. So be aware of things that might find your pumpkins, particularly the seeds inside, very tasty, and plan accordingly. So we've selected the appropriate variety. We've known to pick it when it is fully mature because a squash that is fully mature will keep longer. Wait till the vines die. We've let it cure outside for a few days to develop that nice rind. And then the fourth step that is really the key to keeping your winter squash stored long-term is I bring it into the house and I have a diluted bleach solution and I wipe down the outside of the pumpkin with it. Get in all those nooks and crannies and wipe it down very carefully. That will kill any fungal spores or bacteria that are on the outside, and that will ensure that your squash lasts a lot longer. Folks might be hesitant to use bleach, like, Angela, I'm not a big fan of bleach. Will that make my food unsafe to eat? Well, first of all, it will dissipate, and by the time you eat your squash, it's not a big deal at all. And we're looking at a very diluted solution, so I'm not worried about it. That for me has been the best strategy. Use that bleach wash, let it dry again, and then the last step is you want to store it in a dark place, slightly lower than room temperature. You don't want it in your basement where it's cold and damp. You don't want to store your winter squash in a warm, sunny spot. For me, I have found two ideal places over the years: slightly lower than room temperature and dark. Under my bed in my bedroom has been a fantastic place for me to store them over the years. On the floor is cooler than the rest of the ambient temperature in the air. And we've always lived in old houses, and so the floors are generally quite chilly. So I found under the bed, dark, nobody's gonna bother them there, and they are the right temperature. The other place that I store my winter squash is in my breakfast nook, which faces full north. And I put them underneath this little shelf that we have built where I have, like my coffee maker and my microwave. And underneath I store, my slow cooker, my rice cooker, and my large all-clad pots and pans. And I stack up winter squash in there. And then there's a tablecloth that goes over it. So it's dark, it's cool because it's on the floor. Our breakfast nook is a converted laundry porch. So the floor is really not insulated and it's quite cool. Perfect temperature. Not in a damp place, not in a warm place, not in a sunny place. That's all you need. Every time I go and I pull out a winter squash to enjoy eating it, I just give the rest of the winter squash a once over. Are there any moldy patches on them? If there are, I want to cook that winter squash immediately. I want to cut out the moldy section, throw it outside to the poultry, and then I want to roast the rest of the squash immediately and enjoy it. As long as everything looks good, there's no soft, mushy spots, there's no mold growing on it, I just, rotate them. Every time I pull out one squash, I just kind of look through the others and rotate them and make sure they're doing okay. So those are my strategies for keeping winter squash a long time. Make sure that when you harvest your garden produce, you are able to keep it in such a way that you can enjoy it and reduce your food budget. I don't have to buy winter squash in the winter. I don't really have to buy sweet potatoes. We use winter squash in such a huge amount of cooking. And again, because they come in an array of textures and colors and flavors, I use them for all kinds of different dishes and we don't get tired of them. I mentioned in a video recently about ways that I keep my food budget really trimmed. One of those is using my spice cabinet effectively. Pumpkins and a variety of spices go really well together. There's a lot of African and East Asian and European and Central and South American cuisine that uses squash. And so there's a huge variety of spices you can use so that you can just eat lots and lots of delicious, healthy squash in a variety of ways and you don't get tired of it in the winter. I hope those strategies were helpful for you. I hope that as you are harvesting your winter squash this time of year, you are setting yourself up for success so that you can enjoy those squash. So you don't pop in and say, oh no, everything is molded on me. What have I done wrong? All of this is going to go to waste. Instead, you can look in and say, look at this beautiful pantry full of squash that I'm able to just shop from instead of having to shop from the grocery store. I can shop from my pantry, enjoy the fruits of my labors out in my garden, and enjoy the nutrition and the benefits of having homegrown produce all through the winter when we can no longer be growing it. Thank you for watching today. Please tune back for part 2. I'm going to cut this puppy open and see what it looks like and see if the sweet meat winter squash lives up to the hype. I've never stored one this long before because we usually eat them all. So tune back in tomorrow and please check out my Patreon down below in the description.